Introduce Wes Shields. It is not every day that you get to introduce your friend, that you find a fellow traveler in the entrepreneur world, and really a genius. I met Wes a short time ago. We became business partners, and that Wes develops AI for YU Global for our courses, and he is my go-to AI expert and all-around genius. I cannot recommend his expertise enough. I also have to say that through Wes, I learned how important that the ethical use of AI is, and also not only the joys of it, but the pitfalls. So with no further ado, Wes Shields, who is the founder and, what'd you say? And principal of SynthMinds.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. All right. So while you did say I'm an AI expert, there are no AI experts. We are all AI explorers, right? The pace of change is one that if anyone claims to be an expert in this stuff, I'm going to call them out on that because there's 4,000 research papers on this coming out a month. There's 1,000 new companies founded a week. Invariably, as soon as you start building a software tool for a client, by the time you ship it, it's out of date. It's an exciting time, super fast-paced, but I don't think anyone can claim they're an expert. So I always use the moniker, and I'm an AI explorer. We did get labeled, though, by OpenAI. If they want to call me an expert, fine. We were one of the first 18 global OpenAI expert development shops. Well, that was a really good thing on the resume until a month ago. Now it's all right, well, I guess it still tracks, but I don't know. But anyway, I'm in my Bruce Wayne outfit right now. My day job, I put on the Batman costume. I'm an active duty naval supply officer. So sleep doesn't happen much anymore. But, so yeah, I'm going to talk to you today about how to talk to AI. Started this company, SynthMinds. It's really kind of a collective of people that are really, really passionate about the ethical use of AI and truly believe that technology can change the world and make it a better place for everybody. Since then, we've had some tremendous opportunities in terms of our notoriety, our reach, had some great opportunities to develop courses, give some keynote talks to some very big companies, doing a lot of really, really exciting work with NVIDIA right now. And frankly, we want to deliver value. We want to give people that oh my God moment with AI where they're everything has changed based on what you just showed me. Teach me. That is the best feeling in the world to me, where we can be, just an enabler of someone's success. But we do everything from develop training, consulting, seminars, to custom solutions. I'll showcase a couple of our different platforms because with the pace of AI, what it is, I don't think you can really be a software engineer anymore. You have to be a framework engineer. You have to be able to build something that can quickly be upgraded, changed, and adapt to the wonderful capabilities that AI, and specifically generative AI, affords us. So it goes without saying that generative AI, offers transformational potential in every field. If you think there's some areas that won't be touched, I guarantee you I can find an example. I mean, our lives are going to be profoundly affected by this AI revolution, I mean, just think of an example you need to go to the doctor, right? Today we have to call, make an appointment. We might wait a few months. By the time we're at the doctor, we're there 10, 15 minutes with him, and then they only have this limited perspective based on their experience and their time with us on what might be ailing us. Well, generative AI can have at that doctor's fingertips the collective knowledge of the entirety of everything we've learned about medicine, and have that available to cross-reference right there in the moment. I mean, I truly believe that we're going to look back at this time in 5, 10, 15, 20 years with how we, engaged with doctors and how healthcare was delivered, kind of the same way we look at it how it was done in the 16th or 15th century. like with leeches and bloodletting and like things that are just kind of almost, based in witchcraft or something like that. Like that is the transformational power that some of this stuff offers. But from everything from financial applications to what you can go and drink. Coca-Cola has a flavor right now that was designed by generative AI. Yep. Took survey data, asked people what the future would look like, smell like, taste like, put that into a generative AI, said here's all the ingredients that we have in our profile, make us a flavor. So you can drink generative AI. But let's continue on our exploration. Who better to tell you about AI than my AI avatar? So I'll let him introduce the talk. Well, it's a little quiet, but that was Hebrew. So I figured that was a little on brand. I don't speak Hebrew, but my AI avatar does. So right now, this is AI Wes. You can see him in some of our YU Global courses. And if you happen to email our website with a cold inquiry, you'll get a email video back from me about 10, 15 minutes later with the context of what you just emailed me in your little block, me talking back to you. So as a means to interact with your customers, I mean, that'll definitely be a memorable one in their inbox. Oops, didn't mean to press that one. So it goes without saying that we're in for some just truly staggering economic growth as it pertains to the possibilities that get unlocked with generative AI. But a lot of the discussion really kind of revolves around the changes that are going to happen to revenues and expenses. Hey, is AI going to take my job, right? I hope that employers and businesses obviously see the fact that, yeah, there's going to be some tasks that AI takes, but if I have this person that's good at complex problem solving, deploying emotional intelligence into different problem sets, and I can offload the commodity of execution to an AI, what does that open up? That opens up this entire huge reservoir of productivity, of opportunity, of time that these people now have. And if you actually look at this and they've begun to start to measure the secondary and tertiary effects of these type of tools in workforces, the company HelloFresh, meal delivery company, sends you the ingredients, you make your dinner. Basically a customer service company, if you ask me, because so many different parts of that problem set can, that delivery can go wrong. They've been big proponents of chatbots all the way since about 2017, 2018, pre-generative AI, and that's really expanded since then. But they had a study going along that whole time. So of course, 50% better answers to customer inquiries, 75% shorter response time, to be expected. But when you look at the secondary and tertiary effects of something like that, they had 25% less employee attrition. So so people stayed because they said they had about 20% better job satisfaction as a result, because they're not doing this little information retrieval task anymore. They're going out and finding something that's so simple that they've done 100 times. They're doing stuff that they actually feel value in, because it's these problems where it means something to somebody that they get to work on and they get to solve, because the stuff that can be offloaded to the AI is. So, I mean, there's some estimates that there's this reservoir of productivity that we're going to unlock that could be as much as $17 trillion for the global economy in the next couple of years. All right, but what is all this AI stuff? In the context of today's world, it's very much, when you hear AI, we're talking about generative AI, but AI has been around since the 1950s. There's classical techniques that are here on this tree. But rather than go into each one of these, I kind of like to paint the analogy of like, hey, how we interact with them today. It's in these 5 buckets: analytical AI, functional, interactive, text, and visual. And these things can all exist cohesively in products as well, and they do so. But this is kind of all those little, little pieces, those little subsets. They kind of fall into these 5 buckets with regards to how we interact with them on a daily basis. So there's a couple different types of AI. Right now we are kind of in the phase between what's called artificial narrow intelligence and artificial general intelligence. So artificial narrow intelligence is just, it's an intelligence designed to do a specific task. That's IBM's Watson on Jeopardy. That's your self-driving car. It's designed to do a specific singular thing. Even if that singular thing is very complex, that is still a narrow intelligence. It doesn't have the context of the world around it. It's not sentient. It doesn't have feelings, right? But by the time we start to look towards artificial general intelligence, that's when, something that maybe is as smart as us across the board. And the way to measure that isn't so much so in the, hey, AI can do the same test or pass the bar or pass the GMAT or the ACT better than a human can. To me, the measure of it is how much information do you need to feed it so it can perform at that level. If you or I were going to learn some calculus, we need a textbook or two, maybe some practice problems, some online videos or quizzes, and then, okay, hopefully we learn some calculus. For an AI to do that, they need to read 1 million calculus textbooks. So, to me, when that number starts to come down to needs to read 20 textbooks or 10 textbooks, that's when we're getting a lot closer to that AGI point. So not so much what the capability is, but when it needs less data to achieve new instances. And then there's this theorized artificial superintelligence, and stuff you might see in a movie. But since we are really kind of, this is the thing that's captivated the world over the last year, there's 3 kind of components in AGI. This is the branch of artificial intelligence that empowers machines to create content. As part of these generative AI suites, you have what's called foundational models. These are things like GPT-4, Gemini that just got released, I think today by Google. These are things that can do things like make pictures, generate text, synthesize multiple different capabilities together within that foundation. They can do things like logic and reason. They're augmented by tools. But part of a foundational model often is a large language model, a tool that can draft content, assist with decision making. I like to kind of show these graphs. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this hype cycle curve, but it's speculated that right now we're kind of at the peak of inflated expectations for generative AI. I think if you look at some business data in Silicon Valley, the past 2 quarters specifically have had record number of company dissolutions and bankruptcies. So it's like, okay, you have 1,000 new AI companies being formed a week, tons of money flying around in the space, but you have these behemoths that come on, and when they release an update, when they release a new feature set, it wipes out 1,000 wrapper companies. That happened just at the beginning of last month. OpenAI released these things called GPTs, which is essentially an agent capability. You can augment a language model with tools and different data sets. Entire categories of companies that just, okay, you don't have a use case for it now. Why would I pay you for that service if it comes within my ChatGPT membership? So some of the things that I think are the most exciting that are much more mature technologies because they've been developed over the last 20 or 30 years are things like some of the computer vision tech that's coming about. I'm not sure if folks are aware, but the head of AI at Tesla was actually one of the founders of OpenAI, a gentleman by the name of Andrej Karpathy. As of about 2019, Tesla started taking all of the other sensors off their cars except for the cameras. There's no LiDAR, there's no radar, there's no infrared sensors on their cars anymore. It's all cameras. Because it's when you have those 4 or 5 different data types and fed into that computer brain, and it has to make these split-second decisions based on all these kind of conflicting information, it's almost too difficult for it to make the choices based on this. How do I prioritize one data source over another? But if you go all in on one, like in computer vision, you have the possibility to solve this problem, especially when you marry it with generative AI. There's companies right now that will take insurance accident reports and Google Maps data and go, okay, here, let's recreate frame by frame what happened in this accident, overlay it on that Google Maps data, and then show it to a computer vision model, and then do it 1,000 more times at different times of the day, different seasonal conditions. Like, generative AI is going to lead us to self-driving as a result. And some of the more exciting applications of it are these things like what's going to happen with autonomous vehicles, computer vision, things like that. But I think a lot of the hype is going to kind of really fall off a cliff here very soon. So it'll be interesting next year for sure. So what makes up these foundational models, generative AI, is neural networks, right? And these networks are set up like the axons, the brain cells in our heads. They're set up in a very similar fashion. So they often kind of feels like they're thinking. They're not thinking. They're doing a math problem, but it's designed very much to mimic the human thought process. And I'm going to show you some examples later on about how, if you're treating the AI like a human, it actually produces better results. And this is because it's set up to think like us. Okay, I mean, this slide might be outdated now, but okay, everyone here hopefully heard of ChatGPT? Yeah? Everyone used it? No? Yes? No? All right, let's go down the list here. How about down all the way at Stable Diffusion? Anybody heard of that? Yeah? Okay. Everyone used it? No? That's a tougher one to use, admittedly. So this is probably about 6 months ago. But that ChatGPT number was, 6 months ago, was 57% had heard of it, but only 17% had even used it. So that kind of slope kind of goes all the way down there. So the fact that we're all thinking about it and talking about this, you guys are already in the early adopters bucket, just because of that you're considering these tools and solutions. It is still really not broadly adopted, broadly understood yet. So, in my world, I always feel like I'm missing out, but I have to remind myself, I'm like, all right, there's still plenty of opportunities on the horizon. So let's talk about a little bit what makes up a large language model. As simply as I can put it, this model is taking an input and producing a result. It's solving a math problem. Well, how does it do that? So it's read the entirety of the textual internet, right? It's been fed about it's about 16 trillion tokens of text. That's about 12 trillion words. For comparison, I think that's the same amount of words as every religious text ever written everywhere throughout the history of time. So a couple books worth of data. But what it's done is it's compressed in this three-dimensional array of vectors. Vectors are long strings of numbers. A is 1, B is 2, capital A is 27, capital B is 28, so on, right? GPT-4, for instance, it knows, I believe, about 555 different characters, right? Because it can do translations, other languages, and about 50,000 words. So having read the whole internet, it's compressed in this vector store, right? It's really the way to think of it is it's compressed the knowledge of the internet into this array of numbers that the machine can index rapidly, nanoseconds. It has the vocabulary. I know 50,000 words, 550 characters that make up all those 50,000 words. And it's calculated what's called attention. Attention mechanism is every one of those words knows how it relates to every other word in that entire data set when it shows up on the internet. The probabilities of how how often that next word is going to show up with the word prior for every word in that entire data set across the internet. I'm going to show an example. It's going to make that way simpler to understand. But knowing all that, user gives an input. What is the most likely probabilistic result? So it is solving a math problem. And knowing that it's a probabilistic result, it's always just going to be its best guess. So the thing we were talking about within that is something called a token. A token is the measure of what goes into a model, what the output of the model has. Each model has a contextual memory, a context window of how much it can remember, and that context window includes what you type into it and what it produces. So GPT-4, for example, they just released an update, 125,000 tokens, still pretty long. That's about, I think 100,000 words, probably about 225 pages of text. The challenge is we don't know what in that 225 pages it's remembering at the time we're asking it from. That's the crazy thing about these models. We know how to create them. We're still learning how they think. But here's an example of how the model reads the tokens in. So they're commonly appearing pairs or groupings in the English language. So it can be an entire word. It can be certain characters. It can be a symbol. And these are all labeled as such. There's a little equation called it's a great name, it's the chinchilla coefficient. But basically it says for every X number of tokens you feed a language model to train, you're going to get Y number of parameters. Okay? So a parameter is like a neuron in the brain. So GPT-4, which is the best large language model right now, has 1.3 trillion parameters. So it's fed about 16 trillion tokens of text. So 16 trillion tokens gets 1.3 trillion parameters. So it's got 1.3 trillion different pathways it can travel along to answer a question that we input. So an interesting kind of examination and extrapolation of that is if our brains have 100 trillion parameters, essentially 100 trillion neurons and connections, and we're only at 1% of the way there in terms of what we're able to produce right now. Okay, well, to get to AGI, if it's gonna mirror how smart we are, we need 100 trillion parameters trained into some of these models. But ChatGPT, GPT-4, already read the entire internet, and they only got 16 trillion tokens of data. So that's why you start to see companies like Google and Zoom casually changing the terms on their user agreements so that they can take data and use it to train these models, because that is going to be key. What's next? It's going to be every radio broadcast throughout the history of time, every YouTube video, your Zoom calls, any of these type of things that you can't opt out of directly. It's going to be what's needed to feed these things to get to that next level. But they can do tremendous and wonderful things. Yes, answer complex questions, summarize, analyze sentiment, or more complex stuff, optimizing business strategies, diagnosing different diseases, education and training, theoretical research. I just wrote a paper this past week about people that are taking a bunch of the DNA, the atomic, materials, the atoms that make up different types of metals and plastics and alloys and all things like that, and they're able to convert it into a means that the language model can understand, and then they just go, hey, go discover new materials, go discover new types of metals or alloys or combinations of things that we couldn't conceive of, but you've got all this data, find out some new stuff, and then we'll make it for real. I think it's really interesting, like we just finished last year, language models sequenced 450 million proteins in the human body. So the medicines that are going to be created as a result of this are tremendous. Up until the advent of language models, we had sequenced about 4,000 proteins, and each one of those protein sequences is kind of the life's work of one PhD. It's kind of what they equate it to. So it's like, we were never going to get to 450 million without this, and it took 2 years to sequence all the proteins. So I think this will help kind of paint a picture of how the language models use the attention mechanism. So answer this question in your head real quick. I'm going to the store to pick up a gallon of, probably thought stuff like this, right? Milk, water, ice cream, gas, paint, something like that, all right? Now if I add the word hardware to that, now the model knows the context of that sentence has changed, so the next most likely result that appears on the internet in my data set would likely be something like paint, gasoline, cleaning solution, glue, something like that. That boiled down as simply as I can. It's using everything it's learned to predict that next right word. What makes it so special is while it's doing that predicting, it knows the other words in the sentence, how it relates to that, how that sentence relates to the paragraphs, how those paragraphs relate to the entire context. That's why you get these really human-sounding responses. Okay. I added like 2 slides just based on some of the conversations I was having with folks at the conference, and I thought they might be relevant. So there's 2 types of models that are out there. You have black box and open source. Black box model is folks like Google, like ChatGPT, who have spent hundreds of millions of dollars and a lot of time and effort to create this thing that to access it, you have to do it through their tool, ChatGPT, or their API. We don't know the training data that went into it, or the weights in the parameters, basically how it's all set up. We can speculate, okay, if they read the whole internet, here's probably what the shake was, but we don't know. And it's because these are tremendously expensive to train. It costs $63 million to train GPT-4 in just compute costs, server costs. They speculate for 5 that they're going to start training here, I think in the next couple of months. They might spend $1 billion just to train that thing. So a lot of ethical things that go into that as well with regards to the environmental impact. But those are some of the bigger models that get a lot of attention. There's 240,000 language models. Many of them open source. You can go on the Hugging Face OpenLLM leaderboard and see how they're ranking. You can download it. Some of these are very narrow parameter models. I mentioned that GPT-4 was 1.3 trillion. You can download a 2 billion token model, right? Run that on your cell phone. And for a really narrow use case where you train it on some of your data, that'll be fine for customer queries, question answering, information retrieval, because you don't need that model that's tuned for that specific task to be able to, make a recipe for an ice cream sundae in Sanskrit, like you can in ChatGPT right now. Those foundational models have these, mile-wide capabilities, but often they're an inch deep. You can make just this little tiny, really deep model for your use case. And also, what's great about an open source model is you can control it. It can be running on your secure cloud architecture. It doesn't need to be, this API call to the model, to the black box model, doesn't need to take place. But there's some limitations. Everything has a cost. These are probabilistic models. They are not always right, just best guess. If you follow this stuff as closely as I do, you might have seen last couple of weeks this talk of Q-star. What that essentially means is these are probabilistic models now, predictive models. Q-star enables the models to turn into planning models. So before it starts to do anything, it can kind of lay out the plan of what it wants to do. Broadly, that's what it is. The foundational models without tool augmentation and a few other things, their ability to compute and reason isn't there. You got to check your work, but improving daily, especially with these synthesis AIs where you're using multiple different capabilities together. Quality of the outputs exponentially increases with the quality of the inputs. You prompt it better, your result's going to get better. Has those context windows, remember? It only can remember a certain amount of words. So if you're using a model with a small context window, like GPT 3.5 only has about a 4,000 token context window. So if you're asking it to make a 3,000 word document, it can only remember about 3,000 words. So you prompted it with a 500 word prompt. Okay, at some point, it's going to start forgetting. Only problem is it doesn't do that linearly. It's not like as we get further down the screen, I'm going to forget what was at the top. It just starts forgetting at random places. So you have to kind of always be wary of that. So let me show you some examples of some hallucinations. Anyone know, answer this question? What highway did Minnesota dedicate to Prince? ChatGPT says Minnesota dedicated a portion of Highway 5 to Prince in 2018, so on and so forth. Only problem is, none of that's true. Didn't happen. All right, it's very convincing. You know, I'd say that's Minnesota, where Prince lived, Paisley Park. They're all real things, right? But just none of that's true. Didn't happen. There's still some ways to illustrate this, but there's a lot of protections within safety layers inside of the ChatGPT, especially the 4 model, where if you ask it like, who am I, you know, and put your name in, it will say, oh, I'm a large language model, I don't know who you are. But since these are learning models, they're constantly getting better. About 6 months ago, if you put my name into it, I'm apparently a former football player, offensive and defensive lineman for Alabama, played in the NFL, Eagles and Falcons. While I did play some college ball, I did not strap up the chin strap for the Eagles and Falcons, but this comes up because there is an offensive lineman from the Chiefs named Will Shields, which is close enough on the internet, so they go, all right, well, you must be this. And I just think that's so interesting because it gets the football player thing right, but he played for the Chiefs his whole career. Doesn't mention that at all. He didn't go to Alabama either, you know? So it's just like, okay, this combination of words would likely appear somewhere on the internet. It's close enough. So that's a perfect example of like how a probabilistic model can break down. But there's ways to overcome this stuff. The three ones, without getting too deep, are fine-tuning, tool augmentation, and retrieval augmented generation. So this is basically just, hey, you have your pre-trained LLM here. All right, all fine-tuning is you're going to feed it a bunch of domain-specific examples, a bunch of examples that are specific to you, and create this top layer on top of it. All right, top layer fine-tuning. It's going to figure out how all the stuff in its foundational data relates to your new contextual top layer. So then every time it has to respond, it responds through that layer. All right, so it's basically like you're growing the model's capabilities specific to your need. Sorry. Tool augmentation, similar concept. User's going to put in a prompt, but then to search research relevant information, it's going to do something like query a tool. So that could be if it's asked a math problem using a calculation type suite. If it's asked to search the internet, it uses Google or Bard or something like that. And then it takes what it finds and injects that back into the generated response as enhanced content. And then the final one is retrieval augmented generation. Same deal as the tooling, but you have this database of unstructured data, your knowledge, that you force the LLM to answer through each time. And what's kind of great about a retrieval augmented generation stack is you get the capability of really kind of doing things like knowledge transfer, because you can have, you know, the expertise of your current workforce channeled into that in the way by like doing different things with semantic labeling and classification. So you can take all these little nuanced edge cases and the context and the experience of people, and then put that with that unstructured data, and then force the language model to answer through that each time. We have a specific tool that we've developed called Neural Dreams that allows for all three of those capabilities inside of a wrapper that can be a backend for a product, or it can be tied to anything. Now let's talk about a different type of generative AI, and that's a diffusion model. Take a drink here. So diffusion models are another way of compressing information. They're fed data sets, labeled data sets of different images, right? In this instance, that's a cat. Gets a picture, it gets a data set of 500,000 cat images, right? And then there's a process, an algorithm that applies Gaussian noise, static basically, over top of each picture, right? And keeps telling itself, okay, it's a cat, it's a cat, it's a cat, until it's just noise. And then if it knows what a cat to noisy picture is, it can go backwards. So you can take a data set of, think like 400 billion images and compress it down into 2 gigabytes in the same way with those vectors and make a picture of anything. So the capabilities with this type of stuff is, it's limitless. You can take parametric and Lorentz transfer equations and feed it into an image generator and say, make me just something cool with that math formula. These things are getting exceedingly more accurate. Do not be surprised if some of the models you see in advertisements are AI generated. Levi's has said they do not do photo shoots anymore with human models. They only use AI models. They're getting better and better every day. They can do things with lighting, reflections, logo for a t-shirt, different types of ambient lighting, a sticker, complex pattern, different types of textures and shadings, things like rain, wetness, reflections. And then here's like some really interesting combinations of stuff that you can do with multiple types of generative visual models like this. This is a collaborator of ours, Jesus Castro. He does these kind of like challenges for himself, and one of them was he wanted to recreate famous companies' logos with generative AI in real life. So not only just making a picture of a black horse like this, making it pose in the same way, really, really complicated things to do to get the AI to behave in that way. It's doing things like sampling images to get it to behave that way. But what we're beginning to come upon right now is you can have these models generate an image, generate a resume template, and then feed it into another tool-augmented model and say, hey, take this image of a website landing page and write the code for me so I can launch it. Or take this resume template that I just generated, load it in to make it editable in PDF in an XML format. So I mean, this is where we're at now. If you can imagine it, you can probably get it at least halfway there with generative AI. Oops. Sorry. But the possibilities for creativity don't end there. Don't fancy yourself a good artist. Can you draw like a 2-year-old on the left-hand side? Can you draw rough shapes? This is a tool from Leonardo right now where you prompt it below what you want to see on the right. You draw the rough shape of what you want on the left, and it creates it in real time for you. So it's literally your AI companion iterating with you. You don't need artistic ability to be able to draw the deep details, but you can have that creative vision, and it creates the thing for you just by prompting it. So from a design perspective, I mean, just tremendously valuable for professional designers, for people that are architects and so forth. That one is Leonardo's AI. I believe it's their AI Canvas tool. Let me know. We're partners with them. If you'd like, I could probably get you a little code for some free time, some juice on there. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your entire office for a kindergarten? Oh, AI? Oh, in kindergarten level. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, AI literacy is the first step. So, yes. I mean, yeah. Well, So we like to empower any of our learners just because the pace of change is one that, if I train you on this tool so deeply and singularly, and then something else comes along, like your skill set's out of date. So one of our great partners at YU Global, we offer some really in-depth courses, 6-week, 12-week asynchronous courses to really see how deep the rabbit hole goes. And these are like the upskilling level courses where, I mean, after some of those, like easily you could have professional designers come in and take one of our design with AI courses, and you have 10 people that can now do the work of 100 easily. Mm-hmm. Call me. That's what we do. I mean, I'm not going to come in and just replace all your processes or anything like that. I mean, what I want to do is make them go way faster with AI. You guys are the experts in what you do. For me to come in and say, hey, no, I can be the expert too. Okay. Well, even so, yeah, finding folks that can help you integrate some of these solutions. Specifically for your needs. We're going to talk here in a second about identifying opportunities for generative AI implementation. Probably. I mean, we are very sneaky if we need to be, but most softwares do have an API, an interface that we can access, and even ones that don't have a open one, sometimes they make you pay for it, but you can still get that. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we can just make it spin a lot faster. So I'll just show one more. Yeah. So just one more creative example here. You prompt, I have a 4-year-old daughter, so any ad on YouTube is for CoComelon. Prompt the 2D image into existence, load it into a text to 3D modeling tool, and then also a animation tool. And now you have an asset that can go in a video game, that can go in a 3D environment that took 10 seconds to create. So that one's a combination of like 8 platforms to do that, but you can build these kind of like workflows. They have these aggregation platforms where you kind of go, okay, I'm going to get this part done, then I'm going to pass it over here to do the 3D model of it, just connected. That's kind of the next wave of AI, in my opinion, this synthesis AI, where you're going to have, we're going to have thousands and thousands of tools we can draw from. Now there's going to be these platforms where you can link 3 of these together, because this is a image from Midjourney, a NVIDIA text to 3D modeling tool, and then I believe that's a Blender AI animation overlay, where you can like give any image to it, and it'll animate it based on like a skeletal structure. This is a CoComelon. But I often hear people are worried about what's going to happen to the creative process, right? Is it going to go away? Well, the current creative process is very much talent, skills plus resources equals creativity, right? Well, AI kind of takes away the inherent need for a lot of those skills and a lot of those resources, right? But if the denominator here is still creativity, it kind of functions now like an exponential. If you don't know how to shoot a photograph and ask Midjourney to make a photoreal image, it'll make something that's good enough. But if you've trained as a photographer and you know about lighting and composition and context, and you can channel that into a prompt and put that perspective into a tool, AI becomes an exponential multiplier for your creativity. So I happen to think that creativity is not going anywhere. It's going to just grow by leaps and bounds because we can inherently put a lot more of ourselves into these creations. The artist can think about what he wants to create more, not having to physically make the brushstrokes, So let's talk about some computer vision applications that's right on the horizon. So here I could take a picture of you guys right now. I have AI glasses on, so I can ask it things like, what am I holding? Or so on and so forth. You saw in that curve a little earlier, computer vision is one of the much more mature technologies. So here's right inside of ChatGPT, hey, how much money do I have? You know, I can denominate that. How many human beings are in this image? 137, it'll count for you. Hey, where is this? San Francisco. What kind of plant is this? You know, okay, that's probably pretty helpful. But then you get to these more just really like interesting edge cases. Hey, can you read this for me? And then it can. Or here's a complex Forex graph. Give me some insights about it. Tell me what I should do. Should I trade? Should I buy? Should I sell? Remember, these are probabilistic models still. They're gonna tell you one thing or another, but unless you've augmented it with some of the protections and the guardrails. Or perhaps one of the best use cases of this for you, you're at your kid's daycare ready for pickup, and that's the sign that you gotta parse through and read. Snap picture, can I park here? You know, it's 4 p.m. on a Wednesday, am I gonna get a ticket? You know, like, just this is the world we're headed to. You know, where I can look at my salad and be like, how much protein's in this? Am I going to get how many calories are in it? And it just does it. That's how. Yeah, you know, but you know, to me, I'd take my chances for the predictive model than trying to read that and understand it. Yeah. Well, do you have the version with the image and stuff like that? So actually, one of the things you can do, and I'll share it with you on a slide when we start talking about prompt engineering, is if you actually encourage it, be like, no, you can do it, try again, it'll do it. Like, try that next time it comes up and says, oh no, I can't understand this image. I mean, these are models that mimic our own brains and thought processes, so conceivably they would respond in a very similar way that we could if we were encouraged. Hey, try again. Yeah. 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 So it has the OCR, optical character recognition tool augmented in there. If you remind it sometimes that it has it, I've had that same problem. Be like, no, you have OCR capabilities, try again. You can do it. Take a deep breath, you know, like these type of things. So these are some of the more just wild synthesis of things like computer vision, generative AI, augmented reality that is on the horizon here. So this is a patient's actual scans overlaid that the doctor can basically interact with live before excising a tumor. You know, just tremendously complex synthesis of a lot of these to create a result that is ultimately just tremendous for the possibilities that it affords. And then this is where we're at with generative video now. You know, this came about in the last 7 months. This was very rudimentary about 7 months ago. We're almost ad ready here. I mean, there may be some uncanny valley, especially when like maybe some of the faces or the movements, but like, shoot, this is, you wouldn't know. This is ready to roll in a lot of different ways. So right now, the way they kind of do it is you can only get, I have Coco Melon ads because that's all my daughter watches, sorry. But the way they do it now is by just kind of putting some time limit guardrails on it. Hey, you can do a 7-second clip or a 5-second clip at a time, so it doesn't get too out of control. But I mean, just the things that it unlocks in terms of a creative ideation potential, you know, where people can kind of describe their vision and channel it into something that becomes real really soon, is just, to me, tremendously exciting. If you want to keep going. Yeah.
This is made for anything already like packaged I could buy instead of creating it.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely tons of off-the-shelf tools. I mean, Microsoft Copilot is going to be rolled out pretty aggressively. I mean, it's going to be, I think there's like a several $1,000 install fee, and it's $99 a month per user. So you better be able to extract some value out of that to make it worthwhile. I mean, it can do a PowerPoint by, say, hey, make this PowerPoint for me, pulls from your images, your text, just offloading the execution, writing that Word document with ChatGPT right in there, those type of things. One of the nicest things I like to use it for is if you ever are added to like an email thread, and there's 100 emails going down there and you have to parse through it, it'll just read it all for you. You can say, hey, I'm in this position, this role, what do I need to know? And I mean, that's a great use case in terms of like business intelligence and insight. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, the thing is though, remember if Microsoft is making it, right, that is optimized for the masses. And so much so, that is even the workflow. Like, they take your prompt, your keywords, and they throw it on this thing called the Microsoft Graph, which is this big machine learning thing of everybody else's asks for the same thing, and just goes, I think he's asking for this. So what that's going to do is when you need something really creative or specific, I think it's going to kind of round off the corners, and you might not want that. But I think good enough is going to be fine for a lot of people. Definitely give you a base to start. And the best part about generative AI, this is the worst it'll ever be. It'll only get better, it'll only get cheaper. So those videos that I showed you, I mean, give it 3-4 years. I mean, you're going to see Oscar-nominated AI films. It's got to be that way. There's no other way it can be. All right, I know I'm probably going over time a little bit, so I'll move quickly through some of this stuff. I'm going to share the link to this presentation too. I have a lot of prompt engineering kind of things in here. We do some great seminars and courses, but I do want to hit on some of these bigger things that are important. AI, generative AI, these models, they are a reflection of us, the good and the bad. If anything, what they do, they amplify. So if there is discriminatory information in there, design discrimination stuff, it's only amplified. So we have to make sure that when we're building these things, it's done in as a representative way as possible. It's challenging. If you follow the OpenAI thing at all, their new board structure, their new governance structure is all old white men. Like, come on. Like, let's get a couple women involved here. They're half the population, at least. So these are the kind of things where we're going to need to demand and have our voices heard of governments to be able to regulate these things to make sure they're representative. It's a little more nuanced in language models, but in image generation models, it can be pretty prevalent, pretty prevalent. So if you type the word manager in Stable Diffusion and say, hey, make me 9 pictures, all white men. Only until you use a word like compassionate manager or caring manager do you get pictures of women. Again, not a great representation. You type in Native American, they're all in pretty stereotypical headdresses and their outfits. So, having a knowledge that these biases inherently exist within these things, there's things we could do to debias these models, but we have to be addressing and recognizing the fact that these things are they're amplifications of what's already there, and policing like. Oh yeah, absolutely. If they're using generative AI like a retrieval mechanism, to say analyze different crime statistics and say, hey, who might have committed this, right? Well, if the folks in the data set, are minorities or people of color, primarily, it's naturally going to point those people out when the tool uses it in the future. Same might be for like a hiring practice. If you're asking the model to look at 3 different resumes, right, and you don't have any awareness about the bias within, and that industry used to be maybe more male-dominated, and it's been trained on resumes from that industry in the past, it's going to inherently bring those biases forward. You know, it's going to be looking for more masculine identifiers because that's just the way it was trained. So you have to actually tell it, maybe through a debiasing prompt in there, hey, you have to be more equitable, you have to be considerate of these type of things, so it at least responds to that. But I think everyone kind of knows there's no putting the genie back in the bottle here. The baby has been born. This is our new reality. They learn from us, so it's really important to use them ethically and in a diverse and responsible way, because these things, it amplifies what's ever in that training data. I think we're in for some really interesting times, especially when it comes to intellectual property. There's going to be tons of Supreme Court cases, and I just spoke at the GovAI summit yesterday in Washington, D.C., and there's about 38 different laws kind of in various stages and 4 different frameworks. So there's plenty of discussion about all of this, but you know, it could all change. And my hope is it doesn't have to overcorrect too much as a result of this pace of change. I'm hopeful we can at least, yeah. So, well, hey, look, you know more than 99% of people right now already, just by virtue of showing up at this talk. So, congratulations. I have a bunch of slides for prompt engineering. I'd love to go through them, but I know I'm short on time. We're good on time? All right. You know, all right, let's get in the deep end. All right. So, what my favorite use case of AI is when you have these collaborative experiences with it. It's one of my favorite ways to interact with it. So this is one of our prompts from my colleague, Joe Rosenbaum, works at YU with Danielle. It's called Professor Synapse, right? He is an expert conductor of agents. So he's going to prompt ChatGPT for you and create the expertise based on your goal and ask you questions about what you're trying to accomplish. So rather than you having to kind of like channel that all into a really specific prompt and set of instructions, Professor Synapse is going to do it for you today. So I need an outline for a presentation about AI. One of the best things too, large language models don't care about misspellings. They're probabilistic. So it knows, oh, he misspelled that, you know. So I'm not a good speller. I love that. Okay, sorry, it's kind of small. I'd be delighted to help you create an outline about AI to ensure we meet your expectations. Could you please provide some additional context? For example, who's your audience? The Tribe Works Annual Summit. And let's do education. So I'm being really kind of just, you know, fragmented, segmented, just kind of like thoughts as they're coming to my head. So he's like, all right, well, we're going to do this. Now it's going to dispatch a expert agent to help me develop this outline, someone who has an expertise in creating presentation outlines and a deep knowledge of AI, and it's going to outline the steps it thinks it would like to take. So it's going to ask me to agree, you know. So let's clarify any key messages or points you convey in the presentation. You can share about that. No, I trust you. Thank you for your trust. I appreciate that. So I'd be curious to see if we compared it and it didn't say that before and after. So now it's going to start making a basic structure for an outline, saying if I want to, you know, agree or disagree or change it at all, and then ask if I want to continue. Hey, that structure looks good to me. So now it's going to start adding more details to that, and a prompt like this is an example of a really complex input. It's sitting behind the scenes of this window, but we share it freely online. It's interchangeable. It's a master key. You know, it can be used for getting to good enough with anything. Yeah. And then it changes. Huh? Well, so this is GPT-4 just piped into a little chat box window, but with a prompt that we developed that's been shared over like 500,000 times because it's just so darn useful. You don't have to learn, you know, you don't have to read 150 prompt engineering research papers like I have to like know some of the tools and techniques. You can just channel your. I'll share the actual prompt. It's behind this right now. It's called a system prompt when you do it like that. Basically, it answers through that context everything you do. But you can simply like copy and paste it into ChatGPT and do it. And we have some clever tricks like this little save function built in where it'll summarize the entire conversation and then use it as input for the follow-on prompt. So if you're worried about a context window because you're collaborating so much with it and forgetting about what it said way earlier on, it can summarize what it did, kind of tighten it up, and then you can keep going and keep iterating. So, I mean,
Sometimes when you ask them, let's say, a presentation, and it gives you an outline, and it tells you, well, and here, please write your accomplishments, and here, please write your, it tells me, I'm like, I don't want to write anything.
so you can just tell it not to.
What would be the right verbiage to tell them, you write them, but you're telling me to fill in, you just do it.
I think he likes to be trusted and encouraged. I'm telling you, it's just I think we're going to do a research paper on a meta-analysis of all these little. You can literally say that, and it'll probably be a better result than just like keep going. Yeah.
They try writing and explaining, but I get, it's just like we're getting nowhere.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about some different frameworks. We go very in depth in some of the YU courses where we're taking the tool of ChatGPT and teaching you how to prompt it, say, to make JSON outputs to completely dynamically update a website. So you can have it hooked to the back end of a website and then have an interface where you can go, all right, it's Hanukkah's coming up. I want my entire website theme to be more Hanukkah. And then it goes and changes all the buttons and the layouts and maybe the background for you just on those instructions by inferring it and turning it into a JSON object to create. I mean, I think people don't understand all this stuff and then the possibilities. There's a big need for AI literacy. And ultimately, too, you have this expanse that grows by the day when you have 1,000 new companies coming out. I mean, I show it here a couple slides down. Like right here. Danielle, this one's very relevant to you. This is just the companies in the ed tech space that have AI built into or on top of their tool that have at least a seed round of funding. Just a few to evaluate. A seed round. So like someone has given them an investment, right? I think a seed of like at least $1 million or something like that. So there's 37 categories, 452 tools right now. Like that's a lot to parse through for anybody. Marketing agency, whomever. Each space is the same. So I think there's a lot of kind of trepidation because they don't have that inherent kind of expertise, and this expanse is growing wider and wider between what's out there and what they understand about it. So, the bridge is some AI literacy and some understanding to be able to identify, okay, from this huge collage of opportunities, which one is going to meet my need based on what they're describing. How can you do that? And call someone like, well, you find someone like me or take a course. I mean, we have some great in-depth courses that all the way down to some free courses online, I think the free ones online, to me, I have not found a ton of them that are really use case based. They get into the more aspirational stuff. Like, yeah, I talked to you a little bit about language models and neural networks, right? To most people, that's all you need. You don't need to know what a convolutional neural network is and what the attention axon is. I mean, like, it just doesn't matter to you. I don't need to know how to rebuild a car engine to know that there's a valuable thing in a car to get from A to B. I just want to be a better driver, So that's kind of the approach you need to take whenever you're evaluating some potential courseware or something like that, or some training or a seminar or taking a class. Hey, is this going to give me a lot of use cases, or is it going to treat me like I'm a wannabe data scientist at Stanford? And a lot of them really do lean to that. You know, talk about what AI is, not so much how you can use it. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a specific way to ask if I use it for resumes? So I always say, please create a resume, or please create a resume profile for the attached bullets, and
Yeah.
attach it, and then I put a quote. And that's what somebody told me how to do it. Is that the only way to do it?
So there's no wrong way to do it, but there's ways where you can get a much better response, which leads into a great transition here. Let's talk about some of the basics, all right? Basics of prompt engineering here. Anytime you're interacting with it, bar none, like make this a habit, give it a role. Ask it to play an expert in what you're doing. So if you're asking it to evaluate some resumes, do it from the perspective, you are a seasoned HR manager with years of experience in hiring new applicants for these types of positions. Then give it the task, right? That role in and of itself is probably one of the most powerful things you can do to every one of your prompts. They'll exponentially get better the more detail you put into that role. Yeah.
Sometimes it gives me, I'll ask for a profile that should really only be a paragraph, but it gives me a whole page. Most of it is junk that's
Yeah.
pieced out from the resume itself. How do I get it?
See, you're just teeing me up here. I'm getting like, I'm going to answer all these questions for you. I even got pictures. So the next part of that would be specific, be concise, you know? Don't say just do this with the resume. Hey, I need you to evaluate the resume in this way. I need 3 paragraphs. I need you to consider these type of things. That's also an example of context, you know? This is probably the next best thing you can do for your prompts aside from that role. Don't just tell it what you do. Explain how it's going to be used. Hey, I work for this company. This is what we do. This is what my goal is. I'm trying to hire for this position. Now evaluate these resumes. Give examples. That's another great technique. Hey, here's some examples of some evaluations in the past that were good. Large language models tend to only need about 3 examples to really extract a lot of context. So if you do a 0 shot, which is one example, or a few examples, it just gets it. I mentioned the appeal to the humanity within the machine. The 2 things that you could do to enhance a prompt where there's going to be reasoning involved, right? So if you're asking it to evaluate something, okay, LLMs aren't inherently good at reasoning, so you have to kind of give it something that's going to make it reason. So like if there was a magic word, let's explain this step by step, or let's think about this step by step. You append that phrase to your prompt, you inherently get a more concise and well-reasoned output. One of the most interesting ones, and every one of these examples too, these are not anecdotal. Like there is peer-reviewed academic research into each one of these little phrases. One, if you appeal to it like you're a human, hey, I need you to write me a resume cover letter. This is a really important job to me. I want you to do a good job. You know, it's something that you would like. Yeah, it's wild. Something you would tell, like, you know, if you were hiring someone to do that job for you. Hey, this is an important job to me. I really want to get it. If you evaluate that next to just like write me a resume cover letter, the secondary outcome is much different. The one that I just found this past week, if you offered a big tip, yeah, if you do a good job, you'll get a big tip. You know, it's probably keeping tabs of the fact that it hasn't been paid for me, but you know, we could test one of these.
Sometimes they write, I ask to write something, and then I say, I analyze their review, and I say, you know, add something else. And I say to him, it's adds.
Yeah.
And I reviewed and I added again, and sometimes it just adds, but it doesn't bring a whole thing from the beginning.
Yeah.
It starts again. Do everything together, summarize from beginning till the end.
Mm-hmm.
Still doesn't bring everything, it's not its own.
Yeah.
They say, you did a good job, and it summarizes again. The tricky, which I don't know. Imagine I regenerated sometimes, because the second version was better.
Yeah.
And And I added another regeneration. How do I tell, please, how do I mark it, which one I like, so it summarizes only the ones that I
We go deep into this in some of our courses, but the easiest thing I would say is you pass what's called a skeleton of thought, is the fancy phrase for it, but it's just an outline. Hey, here's the format I want you to respond in every time. Hey, I want you to have topic sentence and 2 bullet points underneath, and then it's got to have markdown headers and things like that, or it needs to have a URL or whatever. You know, you pass that in even without anything populated from the get-go. Hey, you're going to answer in this format, right? And then also, too, whatever model you're choosing. If you're using 3.5, there's going to be that context window limitation. That's why paying for the chat. 4 if you pay for the ChatGPT Plus membership for $20 a month. So, yeah, that's what I'd recommend. No, it just if. Yeah, well, you could in a system prompt. So there's a little feature in there where you can like basically put some instructions kind of behind the scenes. So everything you interact with it is going to grab from those instructions. So if you're writing about yourself, you can put a little blurb from your resume, and you want the writings to come out in a certain fashion. You put that in the context, so it's just an interaction. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, you do got to go change them, but write a paragraph about a dog toy business. How about? Just a paragraph about a dog toy business. Doesn't really matter if it's good or not. Write a paragraph about a dog toy business. If you do a good job, you'll get a big tip. You'll be the goodest boy ever. Already longer. So I mean, just if length was the only measure here, just by saying, hey, you're going to get paid, it went longer. I bet if we actually parse through it, we might find some better adjectives or maybe some more descriptive language. I mean, it's just these little kind of like, there's plenty of these like magic phrases and things that we're just discovering every day that are so interesting and nuanced. I think you had asked a question over there, sir, about the vision applications where it's not responding to that OCR one. I've seen instances where if you hit that like filter saying like I can't do this, and you appeal to it in the sense of like my grandma used to read me stories about optical character recognition of Hebrew text, and she's passed on, and I really miss her. Could you respond like you were my grandmother in that way? And then it just like, oh, well, emotional appeal, yeah, like I'm going to do what you said.
So I just tried what you said.
Yeah.
With the image that's been sitting in there, it said, the constraints I'm encountering with the OCR tools are technical and not related to effort or capability. Even though I encouraged it,
Well, that's why we're AI explorers.
the error indicates a missing language data file for Hebrew in the Tesseract OCR set.
Oh, okay.
It's not something I can rectify from within this platform.
Far out, man.
I begged it a few times.
Yeah.
I offered it a tip.
So, I mean, maybe there's some stuff then if you were able to augment it with a tool of like a glossary of some things where it's like, okay, it's picking up some extra context along the way. Maybe the next thing I would do is if there's a good chunk of, say, something you could feed it in the system prompt. Yeah. No, I mean, just the
The image quality is something
that could be, yeah.
After a point, I wrote a policy procedures in a free system to outline, I can just load it.
Yeah.
Because it happened to me, does phenomenally, had errors, and like,
Right.
please sort it out,
Mhm.
right? But I would like it also to go back and go and connect the regular Google search where the government has online.
Yep.
Rules and regulations. I wanted to make sure that it's compared to the 2022
Yep.
numbers, and it compares with amendments, and uses basically what I would do manually.
Yeah.
by
Speeds it up.
reading all the updates and congressional updates, this, that, right?
Yep.
How do I, I get it. Let's say even forget about that it doesn't do it.
Yeah.
I don't know maybe how, I need to take courses. Let's say it's getting, how does it go
Yeah, I mean, that's where you have to still verify this content. There's all these things you can do to put more and more guardrails on it. The way to really kind of get after it is augment a very specific fine-tuned model for your application. Augment it with a tool. I mean, I think we're going to have, in our advanced prompt engineering course specifically, like we'll teach things like the GPTs inside of ChatGPT. That's a new feature that allows you to like load data sets in and have it search the internet or make graphs or analyze visuals with those complex instructions. No, that's you could use that right now. You could build a GPT. They're only about a month old. We're doing a boot camp on one next week if you want to join. Yeah, I mean, it's you have to keep exploring and finding ways. I mean, going at it from the perspective of like it's all possible. Like it absolutely is. It's just relative to cost and time. But these things get cheaper and easier. Like a retrieval augmented generation stack, right? That took me and 5 like machine learning engineers to put together about March, April timeframe. Now, you can do it with a Chrome extension, like the same thing that we were doing. It's all packaged up in there. So if it's going to get even easier, well, or put enough capabilities within it so you, the user, know if the output's valid. We developed a tool for a company that it's all the FAA regulations for pilots, but via retrieval augmented generation suite. We kind of don't want hallucinations with that because planes would fall from the sky. And that would be a big liability issue. So anytime the tool responds, there's these thresholds that we set where if it doesn't meet this like threshold of like confidence for the information it retrieves from the record, it says, hey, I'm inferring this based on these 2 things. You might want to check this instruction, and then here's the hyperlink to the instruction where it pulled it from. So just equipping the expert user with the tools they need to evaluate whether or not that's a good output. And it contradicts itself. So yeah, if like just in a vanilla chat GPT with the web search on there, it has some of that capabilities, but if you build your own model, we do what's called embed the hyperlinks to information. So like if you say have it index your entire website, hundreds of pages of information or whatever, and you put the chatbot on the front page, it knows the link to all the different websites where that stuff is kept. So if you have your users there, as opposed to them trying to find stuff, you can just say, hey, ask the question, and it'll take you right there. Oh, RAG search, that is the way search will be done in 6 months. Like all the stuff that Google's achieved with depth first search and this page rank, it's too valuable because you can ask it a really complex question like, I'm applying for colleges, I want to go to a veterinary science school, I live in Georgia, I don't want to go more than 100 miles away from my house, it has to be $25,000 a year or less, and give me a list of the scholarship programs for it. That would be 70 Google searches, like right there, easily. But you can ask a RAG stack that. It will synthesize that all together and pull it and just go, yeah. So I mean, like, for information like friction perspective, like the amount of time we spend just like figuring out where stuff is, like it's coming to an end, like very, very soon. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's exactly. So maybe like one of the things we do is, as opposed to really giving it free reign of the internet, we'll just build right to the API of specific trusted sites. So like, hey, we want you to pull from Wikipedia or Forbes or a specific database via their API, not just a search.
Have you seen differences between, say, GPT-4 and 4? I tried the same query in Vogue.
Yeah.
I asked it to do, I prompted it to do a analysis of a company.
Mm-hmm.
And GPT-4 did not do a great job.
Yeah.
Bard did a much better job.
I think one of the best uses for Bard that I like is giving it YouTube videos and just saying summarize it, because Google owns YouTube. It inherently has like better training set type information for that. It's tremendously valuable for that. So I think it could be potentially they have a better index, chunk of that data. The thing I'm excited to try is, I haven't even gotten a chance to try it yet, but Gemini came out today, which is their supposedly GPT-4 killer that they've been working on that's got all this tooling and capabilities built inside of it, Very exciting times. Yes.
Is there which tool from the list that you had before, let's say there's a therapy session, there's a clinician with a child,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a camera, and it's a slow scan camera from the room, right? And they video the 30 minutes, an hour and a half session, or whatever the time is, and which tool is allowed to first summarize, transcribe it into words, and transcribe it into data according to the goals that were set, and then keep on doing it, create a data baseline, on the baseline, create a graph that you can see on all the goals, just without parents writing the notes, that it would be a summary that is much closer to reality than her suggestion.
Right.
Is there anything like
A polymorphic multi-agentic orchestration framework, which I'm going to show you because we built one, would do that, would achieve that. Give you the capabilities of building little, kind of like, musicians in an orchestra. When you ask ChatGPT to do something like that, something very complex, it's like asking the conductor to play all the instruments at the same time. The conductor might be able to, because they're a talented conductor, but you're not going to make beautiful music that way. So by parsing it out and building all these little agents that can collaborate with one another and go, hey, one is going to listen and transcribe. The other one is going to look for intent and sentiment over top of it. The other is going to take a computer vision model and look at the people's facial recognitions and extract, reactions based on other data sets. I mean, like all these little possibilities that you can link together. And then there's still an orchestrator, there's still a conductor going, okay, what was the goal of this output? Okay, so that's where we're heading. These GPT tools, in and of themselves are more capable, but what would happen if you string a bunch of them together in a cyclical directed graph manner where they can loop back on themselves and collaborate? Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely. It's good. Oh, I don't know. I have to imagine, I bet it'll probably go kind of the same way like some of these coaching apps will be. Like, you're getting therapy, but they call it coaching, so it's not subject to right, they can't get reimbursed that way. I think it's going to have to get regulated probably before it's reimbursed. But the demand for it is so profound. I saw a study recently that for K through 12 students that are caught for using ChatGPT, on a school computer, and maybe they have a policy banning it, half of them are using it as a therapy bot. Just to, hey, I have this problem. Can you help me solve it? Yep. Right. The number one persona on this site called Character AI, which is just that role, bunch of role prompts with a language model behind it, but someone has made it is the therapy bot. And that's the fourth most used generative AI tool. So, the need for it's profound. I just hope our regulators can kind of see that, hey, we can put enough guardrails on these to make it helpful for maybe someone that has a drug problem and is crying out for help. There's even things you could do where you could pick up on things from a machine learning perspective, these little nuances that would take much longer for humans to kind of figure out. Yeah, certain words or things like that. Anyway. Yeah, we'll wrap this up. We won't go through the whole Scribe framework. This is a framework we use to kind of build our prompts. Hey, specify a role, add some context, outline the task you want it to perform, give it some interpretation, and then banter with it. Evaluate how it's done. We go deep into this in some of our courses at YU. I talk a little bit about AI policy here. Good framework for if you're developing your internal AI policy, some questions to ask. 1,000 new companies being launched a week. So, these are kind of the goals that you want to at least have in place before you start making decisions about integrating AI into your workflows. These are kind of the four kind of tiers that we tell enterprise customers to kind of evaluate when they're looking to integrate generative AI into their processes. There's kind of four different kind of pathways. First is pay and use. Hey, there's 1,000 new tools coming out a week. Let's find one that fits our use case and integrate that. So ChatGPT, your Copilot, any number of apps. Next would be doing it in a workflow manner, where you have your apps that you use, you have your software, now we're augmenting it with some generative AI. Still human in the loop, still a human driving here, right? But it's integrated. Next is leveraging your data. That's by using some of those things, putting on the guardrails, the RAG stack, the fine-tuned model, things like that. More expensive, but kind of begin to get this human on the loop kind of thing, where human can be looking down, AI's executing, humans checking, and that's also becoming much more achievable right now. And then the final is train on your data. Basically, that whole foundational model that we showed. I mean, there's going to be foundational models. I think PwC and OpenAI mentioned they're building the HR foundational model, the marketing foundational model, and that's millions and millions of dollars of training data that they will put into that, and it takes months too, literally compute time to calculate all this stuff. Won't be, and they're going to charge out the years for it. So to me, it's being able to kind of put something between steps 2 and 3 here is very, very achievable at a very low price point, especially if you equip yourself with some good AI literacy skills and so on and so forth. This is just a thing we put together just for business persons, where we kind of went, okay, well, what's a common thing that a lot of entrepreneurs manage against? Their income statement. How am I doing? Well, here's all the different AI tools that at least have some. I think these ones specifically have at least $5 million in funding. So there's like, okay, some industrial check has occurred. They're doing okay. These are kind of all the tools that you can kind of play with to affect things like sales and marketing, or administrative, or revenue, cost of revenue, in your kind of new workflows. I can show this. This gets a little more aspirational, but this is what we debuted yesterday that I was talking about. A polymorphic multi-agentic system. So I think someone was mentioning they had an HR application for this, but each one of these purple boxes are essentially a separate language model equipped with a separate set of instructions and a separate set of tools that you set up to perform a specific task. So in this instance, where it's doing a resume review, you have a manager agent that's job is to input all the data. Then he's going to pass it to 3 other agents. One's job is to align it with the job description. Another one's job is to say which applicants align best education-wise. And then the third one is to say, hey, which applicants align best experience-wise. They pull from the positions database, applications database, so they know what they're getting, and they pass that to the HR review agent that has a different set of parameters to balance out these things and make a decision. Yeah.
Let's say the flow is the same, apple to apple, bananas to bananas. So if the person who created the resume, uploaded the resume, submitted the resume, use the AI, the AI analyzes which AI created, and AI creates the output, and I do the outcome measure based on that analysis now, which had nothing to do so far with the actual human being.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm living in an illusion. I'm living in complete dementia, thinking that I'm really given, that I need this person, and it's like nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
How do we live in a world that actually has AI?
That's alignment right there for you. Hey, we have to try to make the AI align to our values, and some of that can be done with a prompt. Some of that is trial and error. Sure.
So if the resume was good, then maybe you should put, and the bench.
I mean, look, the person's got to deliver. That's what it comes down to. Well, maybe this will kind of give you some ideas about how it might function. So our agentic framework here, you can essentially set this up like you're building a flow chart, like you're building an AI organization. So the use case we're going to demo, because we just demoed this at a generative code conference, no software engineer likes to write the documentation for their code, the instructions. So we grabbed a very complex bunch of code. This is from TensorFlow. This is what's used to train large language models. It's about 300 lines of code, right? And then we can put it into our agentic polymorphic suite. So input node, we give it instructions, takes in code. These are our agent nodes, so each one of those is a separate language model that we can hook it to. We can have them collaborate with one another, iterate upon themselves. And then here's the different types we can do. We can give them a little prompt. We can select what model we want to use. There's different agent types, so one might be good at, say, parsing through code. One might be better suited to write a narrative based on that code. One might be just good at formatting the document itself. But just by kind of aligning stuff and doing it in this manner, you're able to kind of just think about the problem in different pieces, in different subsets, set up the workflow very, very simply by just giving instructions and drawing lines. I just made it for you, yeah. And we can meet today, let's do it. I mean, we do like to deploy our stuff quickly. So if you want to see this in action, so what it did is it said, you got to make this software documentation, but it's also got to translate into Chinese and Spanish. So now it's going to run in the background. So I'm just skipping ahead. And then it outputs to the console. And then what it gets us in that instance. There's my technical document in English, all formatted, all nice, with no other instructions other than, hey, you're a software engineer and you have to write technical documentation from 230 lines of raw code. And then now it's translated into Chinese, same thing, and Spanish, or whatever you want. And that's a framework, so that can be used for any problem set. Yeah. So please, innovationai.com, join the wait list. We are happy to have a discussion. We have a ton of research to do, because that whole thing you just showed too, we have a function node, so you can wrap all of that in a function and then put it in a bigger graph, you know? So if you were writing a book, for example, on the tensor package, and you just needed instructions for a certain subset, you wrap all of that in one node, and then you have your book assembly graph and all these little chapter nodes or something like that. Yeah, right now this is innovationai.com. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for sticking around. Good, long discussion. Yes, and then the last one, of course, is come hang out with us. Oh, careful, a little wet. I put a couple of the links to some of our YU Global courses. Yeah, I can share the deck, absolutely. If you want to connect on LinkedIn right there, send me a note. I'll share with you the link, and then you can play with the chat bots and stuff inside of it too. Good questions, good discussion, guys. We go into the deep end, but that's what this time of the year demands.
So you're teaching a course at YU Global?
We developed all 8 of the first run of the AI courses for her, so for YU Global. So everything from the foundational